Eury. I'm bringing you in.
Welcome to Speak Sex. I'm your host, Eurydice. I'm a writer and an artist from the island of Lesbos, where the lesbians come from. A fact that made me, super aware of pre-assigned sexual tropes, names, moralities since basically infancy, like since I was able to understand meaning, and it set me apart from everyone else in my little country, being lesbian with a capital L, and what that meant, sexually. So that's been my lifelong path. I've written 3 books on female sexuality. I practice my art on female sexuality. I wrote the sex column, the Sex Files. And I started this podcast because I believe that the moment is now to begin to speak sex fluently and freely, without shame, without judgment, without euphemism, particularly, in order to bridge the dichotomy that we have been trained to live with between our bodies and our minds, or souls, or selves. And to become one again. And particularly, I'm interested in the feminist voice, the women's voice, which has been suppressed, and women being the sex, it is the voice that now can change everything around. And since we have earned the right to verbal consent to sex, which is actually a very recent victory, and the first time in written history, Western history, that this has happened in the West right now, hoping to spread it around the globe. I think that's where we begin. That's our starting point, and then we take it from there. So in the interest of this, I have invited my friend and colleague Lori Kelly today, who has worked at length on very related, similar topics, femme-centered questions. She's an artist who participates in the Paradise Commons, an artist collective that convenes to create femme-centered spaces of collaborative creativity and study. The most recent show, which I saw, was at Emerson Dorsch Gallery here in Miami, and it explored issues raised by Katherine Behar in her essay Facing Necrophilia, Botox Ethics. And we live in one of the global, I would say, capitals of Botox. I actually met Dr. Brand, who I think was celebrated as the doctor who used most Botox in the world. Ended up hanging himself because he was like misrepresented in a show, in a TV show, in a comedy show on TV. I forget its name. In any case, so the show. The Paradise Summit show opened during Art Basel here in Miami, and it featured works by Marcus Blake, Lisa Bulowski, Felicia Shizuko, Carlisle, Nadia Moon, Laurencia Strauss, Mette Torme-Up, and Elizabeth Condon and Karen Rifas. The research, conversations, and programming also centered around a library of texts that was curated by our very own Lori Kelly, who is here joining us today. Lori brought her experience as an academic librarian and a philosophy teacher to the collective, as a reader and an interlocutor, and that's the experience she's bringing to us today. Utilizing a set of tarot cards created from photographs of women's wrinkles, Lori designed an interpretive guide using quotes, citations, and snippets of conversations centered around the essay Botox Ethics. So her research into ideas raised by the article, such as the aesthetics of aging, the feminist potential in refusing to curate an appearance, the ethics of connection against silence, continues. Today we'll be focusing on the use of transformative. I want to say
transmogrification.
Yes, but I'm not.
That's a good word.
Yeah, I'm resisting it though, because I'm going like deep Catholic Church. I know. It's like we're already talking communion.
Transubstantiation.
Yeah, all that. No, it's not the body of Christ quite yet. But the transformative technologies like cosmetic surgery, Botox, and all the other fillers as examples for thinking in a new feminist way, in a more current feminist way. So welcome to the podcast, Lori.
Thanks.
You and I had some conversation, when we met at the show about it, and I myself, being surrounded by gorgeous women who are enhanced.
Yes, that is Miami.
Right, that is Miami, and actually it's interesting because I'm starting a parenthesis here.
Mm-hmm.
What's interesting is that it's one of the few ways of presenting yourself as a woman that cuts across classes, races. Basically, from like women who work manual labor, housekeepers, whatever whatever you may think, all the way to like the richest housewives or working women seem to use it, and many of them go abroad. So there's a lot of this also like cosmetic surgery tourism happening in Miami, where tons of women go to Brazil or other South American countries, Colombia, Peru, and get work done annually, semi-annually,
right? Because
and
there's
come back.
upkeep, right?
Right, there is constant upkeep.
So that's an interesting thing to think about. You're not really noticing any class or ethnic difference in the aesthetics that women are going for when they have work done. They all have this kind of consistent, normalized femme, right?
I am not, at least not in this town.
That's interesting.
Which is,
and it may be just Miami.
Yeah.
Because I know the femme aesthetics that I grew up with in California are very different. The body shape is different. The Anglo women want like no ass and big tits, which is not a Miami aesthetic. Like Anglo women in California would not understand getting a butt lift because their market, they're going for a different femme look. But I think Miami, you're right, it's incredibly similar.
Well, Miami, I was attracted to Miami, when I first came here from New York City. Because of the bodies. I know, indiscriminately, all the body parts.
Yes.
I was like, where have I been?
I know.
I'm just walking like on Ocean Drive and Lincoln Road. I will never forget those first days. And it's like everybody's exposed and everybody's hot.
Yes.
And everybody's available.
Yeah.
And I was like, why am I trying to like meet people in this village? But this is so much better.
Yeah, because, well, number one,
so
we don't have those layers of
the
clothing.
body.
Yes, yeah, so you know what you're getting. It's
right.
Covered up by 3 layers.
Yeah, but also we
down.
have like really good looking people, and we have had statistically much better looking people than any other place I've been to. Throughout the year. Yeah, there are like highlights, when there is like a festival, like the Cannes Film Festival, they have extremely good looking. But that's like a short period of time when different places have like
that's our
a
norm
good concentration.
Here. You're absolutely right.
It's a norm.
Yeah. So that's one thing that I think is really interesting to think about. If one of the books that we were working with is this one called Foucault on Self-Transformations, and it's by Cressida Hayes. It's from the Feminist Ethics series. And that's exactly what she's thinking about, is the ethics of plastic surgery, of choosing to do this work. The ethical question can't be centered on the old style of feminism where it used to be, we had this sense that everybody should be natural, and any kind of attempt to not just be natural was not feminist.
Correct.
Because we're somehow
because we were trying to adapt ourselves to the male gaze that objectifies us,
and that's a bad thing to do.
Yeah.
So now I think that she's asking us to question the idea of what's natural, and what is natural is normed for us, right?
Correct. Yeah.
It's something that society structures for us. We are normalized by the pressures of our society. So we can't fall back on just saying, oh, it's not ethical to do anything other than be natural, because natural is not natural. It's also normed. So we've got to make a different choice about how we think about this as feminists. And
well, I'm sorry to interrupt. The feminist, like the second wave feminist, natural, was basically how you came out of Mother Nature with nothing done. Like, do not shave, do not wax, do not dye your hair, the whole thing. And that was pretty revolutionary, I think, because for so long women were like constantly faking themselves and being done up to be presented, you know, as if like on a platter to the male consumer.
Right.
So even like having that out there, I think was extremely consciousness changing.
Sure, absolutely.
So we don't want to discount that at all.
No, absolutely not.
And it's not easy.
No.
You know, to this day, it remains, you know, kind of like a strong, I think, and proud stance.
Yes, absolutely. And but it is also an aesthetic stance.
Right.
It is a way of crafting an appearance.
Exactly.
It's just crafting an appearance to a different market.
Exactly.
Right? And I think that we've had to rethink that with, I mean, I don't know, I came up with drag queens. Drag queens were my femme idols. And in Key West, where I live, cis women don't bother getting dressed up fancy because that's what drag queens do. They've cornered that market.
That's so interesting.
So for me, that super femme aesthetic was always something that was slightly revolutionary.
Yeah, agreed. From that point of view.
Because,
depending on who takes it on.
Right, yeah. So then you learn to approach those things. That's how I learned to do makeup. I didn't never learn to do it well, but that's who I learned from was my drag queen friends. So I think that if we look at all of the ways that we craft appearance as choices that are based on a market, then we have to think about what are the ethics of those choices as a feminist.
Well, my you know, like shortcut, extremely shortcut take on it, let's say, is if you do it, raise it as truth, it's not okay. That's how, you know, that's how I, you know, again, it's very like basic. It's not an intellectual, highly intellectualized way of approaching it. But what I'm saying is, if you, the wearer, you know, understand, are conscious that this is a mockery or a theatrical expression of something.
It's like a costume.
Like a costume.
Yes.
And it's also potentially temporary.
Yes. Yeah.
Then it's much more healthy than if it's like the be-all, end-all. I absolutely must have like a D-cup and a big the bones, and look like half Nordic, half Latin goddess, you know, when like, for example, you're Asian or Jewish or something completely, you know, unrelated. If you do it in like the drag queens, right? In a kind of like post-realist way, deconstructionist way, then I think it's much healthier, because you can also do you can assume many other identities, you know, with the passage of time, instead of like be stuck in something that then defines you as like patriarchy's, you know, object.
I think that's a really good point. Having the agency to choose a non-linear, non-stable self, and to have the ability to change, that's really that's a move that can be difficult to make. I think that our society, I think earlier we were talking about that difference between the traditional body and soul thing, right? That there is some interior self that you are changing your body to match that self. And I think maybe you hear some feminist, like the lean-in line of feminism that will talk about plastic surgery as a self-fulfilling
empowering
choice, empowering, giving you agency to finally become the person that you really are.
Or get your confidence.
Yes,
become a woman of confidence in this
because
male-dominated
that's who
world.
You really are. So if you're really ballsy to
Mhm.
use a gender
Mhm.
term,
Mhm.
then you're
Yeah.
going to claim that.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. And it is bold. It's like you
Yeah.
go in there, you make the appointment, you go under without fear, without,
It's a
you get
huge
cut up, you
risk.
give
Yeah.
usually the men, because
Yeah.
90%
Yeah.
of these cosmetic surgeons,
Yeah.
unfortunately, are men, the right to, nip and tack and paste
Yeah,
and cut
yeah,
and paste.
yeah.
And then you come out of it, you go back to work.
And you get more clients, or
Oh, yeah.
you get a raise,
You get,
or you
exactly,
get, because
you get the social
are,
approval.
there are reinforcements,
Oh, yeah.
economic and
Oh,
structural
huge
reinforcements for
reinforcements.
that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So then I think what's difficult to think through is what is the alternative to that? Because it's not don't do anything. That's a cop out. We live in bodies,
Mm-hmm.
and we need to be engaged with our bodies and using them, crafting them, working with them. Foucault calls it using the techniques of the self. It's a form of what he calls self-care. So they are things that you are doing to craft a life, but you're not moving towards confirming some self that already is.
Right.
You're moving towards a deeper somatic experience of what it is to have a body.
Mm-hmm.
So it's using the body. It's it is paying attention to what the body looks like. That's part of the process, but I think it's also developing an interior sense of how the body's placed, how it works, how it's used, learning how to experience, how to sense. Those are interior ways of experiencing the body that I think need to be equally thought through and theorized and practiced.
I agree. Practiced more than
Right?
Yeah, practiced, which
Yeah.
is totally different, because it would force the doer to slow the fuck down.
Yes. Yes.
And become the thinker, or
or the experiencer,
or the empath
Yes.
with her own body, the
Yes.
empath of her own essence, her own
Yes.
body.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that is something that we avoid. There's a fear there.
Mhm.
And so it's
Well, I think that
easy
the
to
person
try
who
to
would be
fix.
the person who by temperament, we're also different, but like looking around me, my friends who by temperament are much more outgoing and much more active than passive, or doing rather than thinking, they tend to do a lot more of the cosmetic work. So it's actually a challenge for them, because they would rather do than think.
Sure, absolutely.
But one of the ways that interests, that I think is important when it comes to alternative self-modification, alternative scarification, which can be done by, feminists or trans, or people with like completely newly defined gender identities, sexual identities. The question for me is there like a spiritual, religious element to it, the way that it was, in ancient times in folk customs, when scarifying is a sacrifice to the divine. It's an expression of not just participation in the tribe, but also, but exchange, like you give it to God in exchange for protection or
and the experience
recognition,
of pain and threshold experiences. That's part of that process.
Right.
And I do know people who approach
the rite of passage.
They approach their modification practices of the body in that
way.
I do know people who that's their practice. There's also, I don't know if you're familiar with Orlan. She's a
yes.
She's like a classic
example
of somebody who's really making us pay attention to the process of surgery and the choices that we make.
Right, and what really happens, the inside of the body, the
and
nuts
what
and
it
bolts
actually
of
looks
it.
like.
Yeah.
To make you actually look at the flesh being cut
Exactly.
open.
Instead of just like the final,
it really does. It
post-bandage outcome.
which is good.
It makes me extremely uncomfortable.
I I know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, parentheses, but like I personally am slightly superstitious. So my superstition about plastic surgery is that were I to, take it upon myself to pay, to be put under and cut up for my vanity, or at least for something akin to vanity, some sort of like a superficial body level, appearance level achievement, then the gods, and the Greek gods are very, are very on top of these things.
Yeah.
So my, slightly judgy, vengeful gods would be like, oh, you're okay doing this by choice?
No, they
Let
know
me
what to
throw
do with
your way.
hubris.
Yeah, exactly. Let me throw your way like some real illness you need to go get cut up for.
No.
So I'm paranoid that like I will, shake up the balance.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's the thing is, also you've got a very normative, beautiful body, so there's not that it's a different choice, right, than it is for other people, and there's a certain privilege that comes with looking like a skinny cis woman. And, I have that too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a privilege that we speak from.
Right.
It's not, I've
Right.
never. There are some
But
struggles I
a
haven't
lot of
had.
this cosmetic surgery comes from age. Where
Absolutely.
like
Now
you
there
hit
I
a
can
certain
talk.
generation
Yes,
age,
yeah.
and you're like, oh, my boobs fell, my butt
Yeah,
fell,
there is
whatever, my chin
there is some
fell,
shit
my
going on there.
eyes,
Right? Getting better.
my eyelids fell. Let's lift it all the shit up.
Yeah.
And just go under, pull it up. I mean,
Yeah,
John
yeah,
Rivers dies on the table of
Pobrecita.
I know,
I know.
getting what, her third lift
don't
of some kind.
I know.
I mean, what a loss of life.
I know. But, I think that goes back to one of the things you were talking about is the difference between your outgoing friends who are, like, they're social, they're quick to make a change to their appearance, and introverted people. And that's really something that the original essay that we were talking and thinking with, the one about Botox ethics, that's her point in the essay, is she's using Botox as a way to think about feminism. She's asking us to think about what would it be like if our faces were unresponsive, because that's what Botox does to you. It limits the amount of
your movement, your facial muscular movement.
And she's asking us as women to think about what's wrong with that, what might be right with that. As women, we're constantly called to smile, to give back, to give affect, and across the board, human beings are being called on more and more and more to craft selves that we socialize for likes, for attention, for
feedback,
our livings. Many of us, that's monetized. So, is there something that's powerful in refusing that?
Yes.
In not giving.
Yeah.
Not crafting the self.
Right.
Just not doing it.
Yeah, just aging. Yeah. I know it's not as easy as, because you just said it. The monetary aspect of it is super important.
It is, especially
and it is naive. Yeah, exactly. And it would be, naive of us to say, well, ethically speaking, from a feminist point of view, just let the body age, because there is ageism in the marketplace.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and especially with the fillers, women feel, well, it's not so invasive, it's being cut open, it's less expensive, it's more affordable.
Yeah.
Of course, we know how much of it gets botched, specifically because, women go to like behind, the back room of like the hair salon, because that's all they can afford,
right,
and get the cheap shots. And you have no accountability. You don't have like the number of,
you're going to get some fix-a-flat.
Yeah, you just don't know what goes inside you, how many extra toxins. It's already toxins.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I think, dead cows.
I don't know.
I don't know. So it's like hard to be a vegan and get the shots and then think about it.
I hadn't thought about that.
Oh my God, I know, it's so hard.
Oh, that's funny.
But yes, you know,
Yeah.
I think that the heteronormative aesthetics control us most of all through the economy.
Absolutely.
And that's the power of like late capitalism,
Right.
right? So, and even if you think about it, even the rebels, even the outsiders who craft an appearance that's not heteronormative, that is anti, that is unique, you know, whether they use piercings or intentional scarring and swelling and keloids and whatever, ultimately they are speaking to the heteronormative gaze.
Right.
That's who
As
they're
an
addressing.
alternative.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And we're still trying to, you know, we're always stuck in this like,
Right.
you know, ineffable patriarchy that there is no way out of. So whether we're saying, oh, look at me, you know, accept me, I'm so pretty, I want to like, you know, marry somebody rich or get a raise or, you know, somehow be liked more, for my self-abnegation, which is what
Right.
cosmetic surgery is. But, you know, we also have the other side, you know, who are like, I don't fit in, I don't want to be one of you, I want to be other, I want to, you know, I want to create something unlike what I was born with, because that feels more true to me or true to myself. But they're still addressing the same, you know,
Right.
by doing all this work, who are you talking to? You know, if not the basic heteronormative audience or,
Right.
you know,
That's a good
system,
point. You're
criteria.
either working to fit the norm or working in against the norm, but it's still focused on the norm.
And it's binary.
Right. And the other point is that I think there's a difference between making choices for your personal aesthetic or your personal what makes your body work better for you, your personal pleasure, and crafting an image. And
Let's talk about that a little bit, like making choices for your pleasure.
yeah, I'm kind
Such
of
as?
interested in just the difference between choices that are made because they feel right in your body, or they result in better sex or better experiences in the body, more pleasure. That's maybe a personal choice. When the image that you craft is something that you are then branding and utilizing on a economic level, on a survival level, that's a different thing altogether. I don't think for many people that's avoidable anymore.
Well,
And everything we do is observed, is captured, becomes attention, which becomes monetized. That's how we make our living, most of us now, is with that attention. So it's not a system you can easily step away from.
Right. Even though it's flawed. I mean, I think if you just took everyone apart, you know, one-on-one, and talked about it and said, do you really believe that the self can be expressed by physical appearance? And had like a real talk for 10 minutes, they would say no. They would say no. Yes.
Yeah.
Because I believe that, I mean, I'm pretty sure about it, that people feel that their ultimate truth cannot be described or explained or even you know, or even held on to, because it shifts and moves and evolves. And yes, if you're asking something very, you know, large, like gender, right, and you have gender dysmorphia, or then yes, of course, that yourself needs to be expressed more authentically by the gender that you feel you are. That's like, however, it's a minority, so we're not really addressing it. We can, but we're not really addressing it when we're speaking now. It's more the enhancements, you know, and are the physical enhancements expressing our true self. And so is our true
Yeah.
self basically just trying to say, I feel younger than I look? Like, is it that basic?
Yeah, yeah.
You know?
Well, and
I think like we're shrinking ourselves
right.
if we assume that the physical, realm can express its.
Yeah, and I just don't. I don't find it useful to think in terms of a true self.
Right.
I just don't think
Agreed.
there's that stable thing that you can
Agreed.
pin down and then express.
Yeah.
A self is something that is constantly in flux
Yeah.
and in communication with things
Yeah.
and people going on around you.
Yeah.
And it's not possible to tie that down,
Mm-hmm.
much less, make it something that you can surgically create.
Exactly.
Right?
You're always going to be catching up.
Right. Yeah. So, and
Yeah.
I think that I don't know, but it seems to me that if your time and your attention is spent on thinking about what other people are seeing, then that takes away from the time and attention that you can spend on what you are experiencing and enjoying
Mm-hmm.
and what you like. Haven't you ever
That's
noticed
beautifully
that
said.
when you're in a group of people and you're watching, and you're watching how people are socializing, who's hitting on who and that kind of thing, and you'll notice most of the cis women are sitting and talking to each other, right? They're not following hot people with their eyes. Because often the conversations I have with those women are about how they look. Do I look okay? How do I look compared to the other women in the room? They're not looking around and saying, what strikes my eye? What looks hot to me? What do I want? They're really thinking about
Being chosen.
yes.
So it's the passivity
yes,
of
yeah.
still allowing the men to make the choice.
Yes. Yeah, and I don't know how it is from a male perspective. They may feel the same way. I don't know, but I don't have those conversations.
I think
with
that's
them.
extremely exceptional.
Yeah, I've never had that conversation.
I really
with
think
them.
those are like men who are bi, whether or not they know it,
Maybe,
because
yeah. But I don't have those conversations with my gay male friends either. They're like, they know how to cruise, right?
Yeah.
And women don't know how to cruise. We don't
No.
grow up with that.
Cis don't in general, and I think men too, in a sense. They don't. I feel that the queer community, both male and female, have had to adapt and get like a language of their own. So it's easy to just like get straight to the point,
That's a good
because you
point.
will be misunderstood otherwise. But in this like heteronormative, swamp.
Do you think it's that
It's
hetero
not true.
people use words
No,
to flirt?
no, they use the fake words.
Fake
Like,
words.
yeah.
But it is verbal. It's not like we don't, if I'm hanging out with my gay male friends, it's eye contact. It's nonverbal. There's some hotness going on in the room, but it's not verbal, right? If I'm hanging out with cis people, it's verbal.
A lot of extra words.
Yes, and you're right. It's all bullshit. but maybe that's because I don't know. I just think cis men have a lot of really bad sex because of the patriarchy.
Agreed. And because they're beating around the bush so much.
Well, and they
no
don't-
pun intended.
maybe they're not doing it enough.
Maybe. They should be like not around the bush. Yeah, but I think like in order to choose the queer lifestyle, you've already like gotten through the guilt. Through the inherent guilt. It's like gone in and out through it and moved on. But the cis world, which is vast, are like smack in the middle of it, and they don't know what to do. And so I think that very often there is misunderstanding as to who intends what, because they don't have straight speech about it, so they find themselves often inebriated, in situations that they had no idea they were going into. Like they thought it was going to be one type of sex or one stage of sex or whatever, and find themselves, in something completely different. And the women are often overpowered by the male of the species, who is bigger, and they are unsure, like what messages they gave. They don't know where their responsibility lies. It just gets so murky.
Yeah, and that's where your work comes in. Just learning how to speak about sex. If the way that you are engaging with the opposite sex is verbal, then you're going to need to learn how to speak
from scratch.
Right? Yeah, it really is.
Like, and not in metaphor.
No, and I think it really starts for women with that switch from thinking about appearance to thinking about sensation, right?
Yes.
To think about, what am I sensing?
Yes.
And we do not know how to do that. We're not taught how to do that.
Yeah.
Right? It takes practice.
It takes because you need some role models. We haven't had it, or we didn't hear our moms speak that language.
No, not
or the other women, the older women who were the models of social behavior.
Yeah,
it was the opposite. Don't talk about it. It's all dirty.
Right. Yeah, that's
so. And I do think that most women don't even have words for the sensation, for the range of sensations that they could have access to.
Right.
They also don't really have the confidence of what they give to the sex. They don't know how. I hate to say good, and but they have no idea like what they're offering their partner sexually and how valuable that is. That's why they get like stuck in. What their value is aesthetically, how they look like on the arm, the arm candy thing, the trophy girlfriend, whatever, how they are seen by the world outside, and what kind of status that gives their lover in the world, instead of, judging it on the basis of what the intimacy,
or the sensuality,
the pleasure, the sensuality.
But I'm wondering if that's because sensuality is not something that is as easily monetized as appearance.
Interesting.
Right? Because I think that there's probably unattractive women that are fantastic in bed.
Yes.
But they're not going to get a rich husband. Because they don't have the eye candy thing.
Right, and we also, how are we gonna? We need to know it. We need a system where we know. Because I want to know who they are.
I know. It's true. I know. We need tattoos of some sort.
I know.
Do you think that that would be interesting? Because I do know, if I'm looking around at a crowd of people, I'm trying to think about how I can tell if somebody looks like they're comfortable in their body. And oftentimes those are not women that are 85% plastic. Because that, to me, that just seems to me like that cuts down on your sensation. I don't know. It's not the body I live in.
Right, but I don't know either.
I don't know. It's hard. I need to think about that more. That's one thing that getting old is really good for. It makes it possible for you to kind of disappear in a crowd, and you can sit in the back and just watch people, and I learn a lot doing that. It's really fun. So that's something I'm going to need to watch for that more. There's got to be visual markers.
There have to be visual markers.
Having good sex.
Yeah, I mean, I consider myself psychic, sexually psychic.
Okay.
So I always felt like I will know. I'll enter a space and I'll know. And then the more sex you have with different people, the more kind of like pick up cues from new people that remind you of previous people, and you experience really is all you can have. But like statistically, you cannot have sex with as many people as you'd like to pick like the ones that are best for you. If there was another system, an ethical system.
And that comes down to really
so you don't want to like
communication.
Rate. You don't want to rate because that's like so horrible.
No, but you do want to communicate about this is what gets
that's
me
what
off.
It is. Yeah. Exactly.
This works for me. This is what my body likes.
Right.
This is not
right. What's your pleasure? How do you elicit the most pleasure?
Yeah.
What have you done? What would you like to try?
Yes, yeah. And those things are, some. But I think there also needs to be a nonverbal communication and cues and things that happen before that. I don't know. It's like you said. It's a new. We're all trying to negotiate that balance between verbalizing and sensuality, and it's new for everybody.
And between authentic desire, whatever that is, because of course we're social beings, so our brain is already programmed by since early childhood by all kinds of uncontrollable stimuli, and how our brain chose to respond to it, to that stimuli. But what is authentic desire and what is assumed desire? Which I think is a big issue. I am very conscious for myself. So I imagine most people would be too, of, when I see someone who I think they are desirable, hot, because they fit a model.
Yeah.
And so I am turned on, but I'm also aware that I'm turned on because, the entire culture has conspired to turn me on. I've seen so many advertisements, since childhood. I've seen so much porn. I've masturbated so much. So
it's just,
and then which one is authentic? Where there is desire that's perplexing.
Yes. Yeah. Well, for me, that's usually been because I'm sleeping with somebody who looks like that. So the people that I've found attractive change based on who I'm having decent sex with, right? I'll notice different kinds of people.
And then you look for people like that.
Or just my eyes notice them because my body has found that attractive.
Yeah, it's like Pavlovian.
Yes, it is. It is. So.
It's like, if you, date bald guys and they're make you happy, and then you're always going to look for the hairless guy.
That's where your eyeballs go.
Yeah, we need to. Okay, so the main thing we need is consciousness. It's again slow down. To give ourselves time to wade our way through all of these issues and try to sense what's authentic, most authentic.
Yes.
For the present moment.
Yeah, and it's not an authenticity that's going to be valid maybe next week, but it is. But it is. I think that difference. I don't think that I'm not big on authenticity, but I am big on that difference between what is sensation and what is trying to craft an image. I think that's a legit difference in the way that we experience our bodies.
Right.
And the more attention we can pay to our bodies, the better. And sometimes that means that you need to stop thinking so much about what other people are seeing with their eyeballs.
Right, which we cannot really know,
Yes,
we imagine, and usually we imagine the worst, in my experience, and as you mentioned that when you said women are comparing each other.
Yes,
in my experience, it's the women that most often, the patriarchy influenced female gaze that most often other women are trying to match up to or please. Because men in the end are fine in the dark with a couple of good orgasms. So it's the other women in the room.
And my sister used to be able to walk into a room and immediately tell me where she ranked in the hotness scale in the room compared to the other women. Wow. Just like that. Wow. She was good. And I was always pretty clueless. I don't know. I mean, I think that for us being slightly outsiders, it's just simpler to not participate in that. Yeah, I liked watching them do
me
dance,
too.
though.
I've always been a voyeur. I feel really comfortable in that role, but I would have no idea. I try to present myself as different and eccentric as much as I can. And I'm always really surprised when heteronormative men are attracted to me. And I just keep asking, what?
What?
Why? What? What am I saying?
I did something wrong.
You know,
got my market wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, but anyway, yeah, like socially constricted, desire as well as body image is what we're talking about.
Right.
So,
So
ideally
what's the
it would
ethical
not
path
be.
out of that, and so one of the things that Cressida Hayes says is that it's one of the paths forward that she's talking about is just any kind of bodily practice of like yoga, meditation, anything that's interior in that way. That's something that she uses as an example.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Just that sense of developing a sense of what your body feels like, right? I'm sure there's others. So.
Well, for me, if I were to add my 2 cents, so whatever 2 cents worth,
that's about.
Yeah,
you can have more than 2 cents.
I don't know exactly what it's worth. I'd like to be a little more accurate, but okay, 2 cents. I think that taking ourselves out of the herd, the crowd, the group, including the freaking yoga class, is helpful.
Yeah.
So there is a difference between wearing the tight workout gear and going to yoga,
right?
And like stretching as hard as you can,
and getting the pose perfect.
Yeah.
Right.
Because there are like all these people around you whose opinion matters.
Yes.
And there is a difference between that and what I call getting in touch with your self-tourism, which is going to unpopulated nature places, by yourself or like a safe person, and immersing yourself in nature away from everybody, away from the culture that's in charge, of our brains. And then you can, and like regarding meditation, yoga, I think it's more beneficial from the point of view of our conversation to do it in the privacy of your home, in your backyard, then again, so taking time away from the system of like social approval, feedback, all that stuff, I think is helpful to find that balance,
Right, and I think that's an important point, is that any technology of self-care can become something that's used by capital.
Anything. And what's going to, I don't know if you have it, I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, go ahead.
I don't know if you've thought about this, but I have wondered like what's happening as we enter virtual reality, which we will.
Yeah.
And then our bodies, which are now, cosmetically enhanced, maybe just virtually enhanced. And then what happens between that self and that appearance, which is extremely changeable. I mean, it's much more easily changeable.
Yeah, that's interesting. I took a class at UC Berkeley on digital culture a long time ago, and one of the articles that I remember was looking at people's the choices that they made to represent themselves when they engaged in online communities. What kind of ethnicity, sex, gender, all those appearance choices that they made, and how those matched up with their actual gender, sex, race, why people made those choices to be different than what they were. I think that it says a lot about what we're dissatisfied about in our own lives, and also how people are interested in trying to work those differences out at a virtual distance, because we don't know how to work them out face to face.
Exactly. Right? And as we become more and more digital and virtual, we will have less facility face to face in real life. Yeah. Because, virtual is just so much more fun. You can lose yourself in it.
Right.
Literally.
Yeah. but it's also, at least it's not popularly or widely somatic. It's all in your head.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
And so, but historically and economically, it's always the sex industry that monetizes first on any kind of digital platform. So we're moving into virtual reality. It's going to be sex.
Yeah, it's going to be virtual porn.
That happens first, and it's happening
There's
now.
going to be so much money in it,
Yeah.
of course.
So
capital, yeah.
it's
I
going to be
agree.
interesting to see what they come up with.
There will be a new field of psychology, I think, just dealing with like virtual pathologies. And, you know, we are going to be out there to be, you know, heard by the people of the future who will know better than we do now what has happened.
Yeah.
So, yeah, global citizens of the future, like, you know, listen in, please. This is all we don't know.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
An hour of saying what we don't know. Are we still going to have bodies? I don't know.
I hope so. I don't know. Yeah, that's a famous psychology thought question. That if you had an absolutely perfect life with a perfect body that had every single sensation that you wanted, and but that was all just virtual, and you were really just a brain in the vat, would you have a good life? Is that a good life?
Well, we don't know. They know.
They will know in the future.
They will know.
They can come back and tell us.
Yeah. And they may. They may just, who knows what they can do.
I don't know. They may be here already.
Exactly. John, have you come back from the future? joltradio.org. The aliens are here with us.
You know?
That's it.
Yeah, well, that's great. Okay, so, you know, we pretty much, I hope we answered every single question on the topic.
All the questions that the aliens had.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming, Lori. That was
fun.
wonderful. Yes, we need to do it again. Thank you for trusting me as your sex whisperer here on Jolt Radio, and I'll be back with you next week. Until then, speak sex. That was good.
That was fun.
That was a nice finale. I like that.
It's always good to have a lot of laughing.
Yeah, and I like taking it to the unknown future.
Yes.
Yeah, that was nice. I'm very happy with that ending.
Excellent. It was fun.
Right?
Thanks,
It's
John.
fun.
Oh yeah, my pleasure.
Yeah.
So I have to listen to your radio station. I didn't even know it existed.
Well, now you know.
Now I know.
You have been here.
Joltradio.org.